CPAC Australia, please give a warm welcome to former Liberal Minister for Immigration, Gary Hardgrave.
Well, very good afternoon to all of you true believers and you know, we may well be conservative, but we're not boring. Absolutely important that we feel very excited about where we're at and where we've come over the last couple of days. So I'm delighted to be here today to speak to you, the penultimate speech for the day. So you can take it from me, there's not much more to come. And I know that Maurice Newman was worried about what, the seventh husband of Elizabeth Taylor might have been going through. I think I might be one of the boyfriends on the side, I don't know. But either way, let's try and make it interesting. Look, ladies and gentlemen, it's pretty simple from my point of view. I don't have any of the eloquence of Bronwyn Bishop or indeed Maurice Newman or others. But as a Queenslander, as a proud Australian, let me just bring some practical observations. This year is 50 years since my parents were so concerned about where Australia was going under the government of E.G. Whitlam that they joined the Liberal Party, okay? 50 years ago. Let me tell you right now, we have a bloke who's Prime Minister of Australia who makes Whitlam look like a genius. An absolute genius. We should be gravely concerned. And just as my parents inculcated to me, encouraged me to think about our community, to think about our nation, to think about, from a family point of view, how we can thrive and survive, that's the job we all now have. We've heard a lot about conservative, we've heard a lot about political, but now let's get on to the action side of the agenda. Now, the left like to do public protests, and frankly, I'm not a fan of public protests because it's 30 years since I stood on the stage in King George Square in Brisbane and screamed out "Fight Back" with John Hewson and people like that. What a dud sort of campaign that was. But my point is that our type of people, Middle Australia people, really don't go to protests. And protests are only ever, big public protests are only ever as good and as effective as the craziest person in the crowd. You see what happens in Victoria. They put people in there who could give offensive salutes and have all sorts of associations that people then use later to try and diminish the message of those who are in fact giving good messages, trying to talk common sense to Australia. So now I think it is time for us to not just simply identify the problem, know where the enemy is, if you like. Now is the time for us to be the ones, through our own actions, our own deeds, to save Australia one family at a time. Parents and grandparents need to talk to their children. They need to encourage their younger Australians within their midst on occasions like Father's Day, on occasions like Christmas Day. You can't tell me politics isn't discussed on those sorts of days. You've got to give them the kind of wisdom of the years, the experience which should count, that actually gets people fired up, powered up, geared up to do something about what is coming in Australia today. Government is out to get you. It's a simple message. Government is out to kill small and family businesses. We don't need farmers because we've got Woolworths and Coles, we're told by the Green Left. We now need to know that if that's what they have planned for us, we need to push back. I don't want to say fight back. We need to push back. We need to get ourselves out there, as Solzhenitsyn observed in the Gulag Archipelago, to be the first one to stop clapping. You know the scenario where thousands of people are in the Politburo listening to Dear Leader. This is coming to Australia if we're not careful. Out there listening, and no one wanted to stop clapping when the Dear Leader spoke. They had to keep clapping. They'd clap for hours, and the first one to stop clapping, well, they'd get taken out and shot. Well, and it's not a joke. This is where Australia potentially is heading. We're heading to a one-party state where, in fact, the left will have control of every aspect of our daily lives. We're being told only the government can solve every problem, that families really are redundant to the way in which society operates, that if you've got a problem with your children, parents aren't involved. We'll bring in authorities to come and check the parents' conduct, to come and check that the children are okay. Yeah, there are some dud parents, but most of them are good. And the trouble we now have, and philosophically I believe this, the difference between the left and the right when they're in government is the left believes that most people can't be trusted, so let's frame our laws to restrict everybody, to bring in a fee, a form, some sort of penalty. It's a tax, it's control. And we have those people well and truly within a frame and we control them. Whereas those on the centre and to the right surely must believe that most people can be trusted, that people can in fact get on with their lives, that government doesn't need to interfere in their lives, that in fact we'll punish the wrongdoers, not those doing the right thing. So as I say, we can save Australia one family at a time. If the family continues to be, and I believe it does, the basic unit of our society, then the impact of saving our society can only come from within the family, to actually generate a family-based response, to take responsibility for our little bit of Australia. The pixel that creates the big picture starts in each of our own homes, no matter what particular shape or form your family happens to take. I heard earlier today, and I think Maurice Newman might have been the one that made the comment, that migrants to Australia come here with the promise of something better. And as a former minister in the Immigration Department, I know from so many people I've spoken to, regardless of their religion, regardless of their family culture and heritage, they come here to do better. In fact, I think it's been the secret of Australia's success for many, many generations, that migrants come here, you leave your country of birth to come to the country of choice to go forward. Whether you're the richest of business migrant or the poorest of refugee, you come here for something better. And that personal energy, that enterprise, that ambition really has made an enormous difference that's rubbed off on each and every one of us. Some of them fit in perfectly, hand to a glove. Some find it a bit harder. But it's up to us to find a way to welcome people, to show them the way, just as we did when we were at school. Don't use the bubbler second from the left because the water doesn't come out properly. Don't use the toilet third from the right because it doesn't flush well. You know those, do you remember that? I do. Anyway. But my point being that we all have a responsibility to welcome those migrants because they are part of what we do. But right now, Australia is set up to betray the ambition of that enormous energy that we want to bring to the country. The government says the way to fix Australia's economy in the middle of a housing crisis is to bring, 1 million extra migrants to the country over the next 5 years. We're going to build 1.2 million homes, but we're going to have 1 million extra migrants here. I don't know, these people, they obviously failed at school. But there is nothing for migrants to do when they get here. The government seems to have the logic that we're going to have a barista-led recovery. Where are the big projects? Where's the big Australia plans to back up the reason for people to pack everything up and come here? At the end of the Second World War, those who'd been fighting each other in the tundra outside Moscow, shooting at each other, 5 years later they'd put down the guns, they picked up the shovels and they built the Snowy Mountain scheme. The Poles, the Germans, the Russians, everybody worked side by side to achieve something for their new country. That was when we were into nation building. That was a period of time when Australia's population grew because our reputation grew. But right now we have a rubbish reputation around the world. The deal coming to Australia is this: you pay more for electricity than anywhere else in the world. You have no guarantee of water supply outside of the major cities, and even then, we still don't build any dams. Our food, well, we don't need farmers, so we don't need to grow anything. We're just going to fill all of our great agricultural land up with, and I'm being facetious there if anybody wants to misquote me, we're going to fill up our great agricultural land with solar panels and wind turbines. And if we can't fill those lands up with that, we're going to put up enormous towers, spend $1.5 trillion of extra infrastructure made in another country and bring it to this country. And somehow or other we think we're clever. We're just patently stupid. And so we have to seize Australia back one family at a time to get our young people to understand that this kind of magic pudding nonsense that's being pushed by the Green left is in fact going to consign every one of our younger Australians, grandchildren, great-grandchildren to come to be serfs of the state, because that's all they're going to do. They're going to work cradle to grave to be responsible for the payment of the kind of debt that's being clocked up by people who just don't give a darn. They just don't give a darn. They certainly don't give a damn. We haven't built a proper dam for 30 years or more in Australia. And our population's gone from 16 and a bit million to 26 million and no new water supply built. So I have a dream, folks. I think that Australia can actually have an agricultural-led future. We feed 150 million people a year. Our farmers work hard to bring out of the often dry lands of Australia food for 150 million people. You might think that's great. But if we had proper water supply where we need it and when we need it, reliably damming the great rivers of the north and sending the water where it's needed, we could feed a lot more people, 1 billion people, easy. We should be backing our farmers, not polluting their agricultural land with more and more of these dreadful electricity items. We can't feed the world, and water is a key part of it. Now, on the 1st of May in 1996, a great and powerful speech was given by me in the Australian Parliament. It was my first speech. We used to call it a maiden speech, but apparently that's politically not correct anymore. But my first speech to the Parliament, I made the point very plainly that the role of government in a landmass this big, with a population so small, was to provide the productive infrastructure that people in the private sector need to go and earn a dollar. It's just true. It's just a reality. And I know we've had the Ayn Rand folks here, and that's good. But the idea of having mass nationwide competition on all things is really quite difficult in a country as big as this, in my opinion. So government does have a role. And it's why I'm prepared to pay tax, and plenty of it, each year. And I'm sure that's what you think of too. But government doesn't want to build anything anymore. They've given up on building anything. The Environmental Protection, Biodiversity Conservation Act's been weaponised by every state around this country to find, the bum-breeding frogs and whatever else that might happen to stop a dam being built. But no problem if you want to go and dig 30 feet to the ground to put up a great big wind turbine somewhere on somebody's land. There's a very quick, fast lane for that kind of approval, but everything else just takes so much time. Government does have a role to build infrastructure, yet they want to shut it down. When it comes to power resources, they want to get rid of our coal-fired power stations, and are. They want to replace it with these other things, and they are. Destroying farming land, and they are. And yet what they should be doing is replacing them with those small modular reactors. All of this can and does make sense. All of this can and would make a better Australia. Where's the vision? We need this vision. So the only thing I can say is, on my call to action, is join CPAC if you haven't. That's one thing. Join the IPA if you haven't. That's another. Join your favourite political party. Mine is the Liberal Party, and not because of any endorsement of some who want to drag it to the left. I believe the Liberal Party is, and rightly, centre and to the right, but we need people not to abandon it, but to join it, to be engaged, to be involved, to make sure that the right candidates and the right policy positions are taken on all occasions. Absolutely critical, in my opinion. Absolutely critical. Ladies and gentlemen, a great English-Irish gentleman, one of the predecessors in my old seat of Moreton in the southern suburbs of Brisbane, Sir James Killen always used to quote, Edmund Burke, made the point that for evil to triumph, good men, in brackets, and women will do nothing. Well, right now we are seeing stupid everywhere. We're seeing not just evil, we're seeing stupid. We're seeing bad government on all levels. As I said, a government at the federal level so bad it makes Whitlam look like an absolute genius. Economic genius, social genius, the whole lot. He wasn't, he isn't, he was the person that motivated my parents to join and get involved in politics, and more so in the community. So I can only but say to you, the challenge is this. What are you doing about it? You're here, which is an enormous first best step. You're interested, as was observed earlier, as leaders of various organisations and communities from which you've come. This movement, CPAC, is about giving air to these sorts of issues. One, But what we need to do is to not just have a room with 1,000 people, as has been the case through the course of this weekend, but we need to have 2,000, 5,000, a venue so darn big that it'll take on stadium-like proportions. Australians are angry, and rightly so. And with recent research showing that 67% of people are frightened to speak up for fear of being labelled a racist or a bigot, or a right-wing nutjob, or whatever else they want to throw at you. 67% of people. I predict today that's going to be the no vote, by the way, in the Voice. Something in that order, somewhere up to that, because Australians are in a silent majority mood at the moment. Frightened to speak out, sure. Frightened to be the first one to stop clapping. Frightened to stand up and say, you know what, I'm not going to take this anymore. But we don't need public displays on the streets. We just need families to sort themselves out, one family at a time. Let's take back Australia. Thank you for being here today. Thank you.